Hello, I'm Brigantia Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Sunday and welcome to Norse Studies Week 6. This week I finished up the section that I began last week in the Heathen Handbook by Woden's Folk Kindred. The first part focuses on Georges Dumézil, a French Indo-European scholar. Dumézil's theory about the structure of the faith is twofold. The first part is that the origins of Norse spirituality stems from a point in the far distant past when the ancestors had one common language and lived in one specific region. The beliefs and practices were carried with the people as they spread out, changing here and there depending on the environments and the needs of the people, but the heart of the faith essentially remained constant. And the second part of Dumézil's theory is that he believed there are basically three categories of gods: sovereignty gods, warrior gods, and fertility gods. Each deity has a primary function that fits into one of those categories, and it's thought that their secondary functions also touch upon the other two. It's just not their primary focus. And this model has been suggested as a starting point for us to begin to understand the gods. Now, obviously, this isn't an end-all be-all, but it is a place to begin, and just as approaches go, I don't think it's wholly unreasonable. The next part of this section deals with the concept of cult. Generally, when something is described as a cult, be it religious, political, or some obscene mixture of the two, we tend to think of a group that's highly controlling, a belief system that's inherently psychologically damaging or even physically dangerous to its adherents. However, that is not the only meaning of the term, and it's not the original meaning. The authors highlight that cult shares the same root word as culture and cultivate. Cults can simply refer to the beliefs and practices surrounding the worship of specific deities, and it is in this context that the authors use the term. When examining ancient heathenry, cults existed at both the individual and communal levels. Some people were called great friends of certain gods, and they likely created and maintained holy sites dedicated to their primary deity, and they would center their worship, sacrifices, and feast in that particular place. Sometimes these closer relationships were based on a similarity of temperament between the individual and the deity, or because a particular god had a long-standing relationship with a certain family, or because that deity's primary function related to the livelihood of the people. One of the ways that the gods are referred to is elderkin, or Regan, which means great ones. And these great ones were always believed to take an interest in the people who venerated them, and they were welcomed into celebrations as family, as brothers in arms, as an indispensable part of the community. And then together, all of these cults formed a larger, cohesive, mutually beneficial system. One cult might have a greater ascendancy at one particular time, but they all still came together to form a larger whole. Now, the next part of this section is titled The Myths of Our Way, and they have a review of the creation myth, and then they go over, really generally, not too in-depth, the gods, goddesses, other beings, what happens to the dead, and Ragnarok. And then they go on to how to build a unified view of the lore, at least a little bit. I wasn't I wasn't overly enthralled with that aspect of it, but I will give them credit because they took us beyond the theories of Jung, Carl, and Dumézil, and they started looking at the stories through a more religious mindset. Um, but because I covered creation myth, the broad outline of Ragnarok in previous videos, I'm not really going to get into it again here, especially since the series is still so new. But if you're interested, just go back to the first and second week of this series. I haven't really changed my stance on anything that I said then upon rereading this section of the book. Now, the next section of the book goes in depth with the Asir, and I want to save that for next week because, for a couple of weeks we've been focusing primarily on the book, but I also want to get into other things, particularly because recently Jacob of the Wisdom of Odin channel on YouTube, he posted a video encouraging pagans everywhere to embrace singing, music, and dance as being an integral part of our worship. And I want to add my voice in support of his idea. I have his video linked in the description box, and absolutely view it for yourself, see what he has to say. I think he's right. I think Jacob is absolutely spot on about this. I think we have become just too uptight and self-conscious, and I agree with him that social media is probably what makes that tendency worse. It's as though we've got it stuck in our heads that unless we can do something at a professional level and do it flawlessly, then we shouldn't do it at all. It's probably time to grow a thicker skin. be less concerned with people's opinions and whether or not they think we're any good at singing or music or dance. And we need to start remembering why it is that we sing for the gods. Why do we dance? Why do we cut loose around the ritual fire and clap our hands and have music and sing and dance, all of these things? It's because it's a celebration of the gods, a celebration of the occasion and of the relationship of it. It isn't about judging or being judged or showing off or being humiliated. It's about just relaxing, celebrating that connection, and having a good time. Yet pagan worship should be a good time. Now, moving on and to finish up this week, I want to return to the idea I touched on a few weeks ago, and that has to do with daily practices. I'm getting further and further away from the idea and the whole mindset that spirituality can or should be compartmentalized. It was a way of life for our ancestors, just a part of the way they did things, how they did them, why they did them. And I would like to emulate that in my own practice. Now, already for Loki, I give him daily offerings and I make sure that I give him my attention, be that through prayer or meditation or through some other means. And I also want to make a point to listen to music composed specifically to honor the gods every single day, even if it's just one song, because by making it part of what I'm listening to and having that in my brain, it further puts the energy and the meaning of that song into the universe, and it signals to the gods that more and more people are welcoming their presence and influence, and that I am one of those people. And I think it's also time to spend a lot more time outside. It's not freezing cold yet, and we are beyond the threat of melting from the heat at the moment. This is just kind of the best time of year to be out and about. There's something about being outdoors, even living in town, that just strengthens that connection to the land and to the gods. And so these are the simple things that I am doing to make my practices more about how I live and why I live the way that I do. So, those are my thoughts for this week. Tell me, but leave your own in the comments section, please, or come see me on Gilded. There's a link to join us in the description box below, and I'd be very happy to have you. I would be happy to have a conversation with you there. Oh, geez. Oh, I think it's time for a cup of tea. I'm starting to stumble over my words. I'm sorry about that. But that's where we're leaving it this week. I will see you next time. Bye.